Welcome to the WIHS Journal. I'm WIHS General Manager Steve Tuzanu, and with me in the studio is Jeremy Bradley. He is the Executive Director of Caring Families located in Willimantic. Jeremy, thanks for coming into the radio station.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Tell me how you came to faith in Jesus Christ.
I think we all have our own unique stories about that, our own experiences. For me, I always grew up in a household that believed in God and would even believe that Jesus was the Son of God. But I clearly remember when I was in my late teens and early 20s, I didn't have a personal relationship with God. I didn't understand God. I didn't understand Jesus. And so a couple things kind of happened along the way. One of them is when I ended up getting married, my wife and I found ourselves fighting on Sunday mornings all the time. And it's just like it was the stress of the week piling up. And so every Sunday we found ourselves around 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, and we were fighting all the time and just really struggling through some things. And so also at the same time, a friend that I had known from work had invited me to church. And that's pretty much what started it. And so we started attending the church, and they were started listening to a lot of different things. And there was this one particular sermon that the pastor had given on that Sunday. And there was a thing that was really off-putting for me, and that was hearing when I was attending church. I'm hearing all these hymns about blood. There's blood here, there's blood there, and it just seemed kind of creepy and just a little dark, and I didn't understand it. But this particular sermon, he was talking about the significance of the blood through Israel and the Hebrews and just what it stood for. And I think it's at that time that the Lord spoke to me, because it was kind of a stumbling block. And it was really at that point where I said, okay, Lord, I understand it, I get it, I know enough. And that's really where my life changed at that point.
What were you doing before becoming the Executive Director of Caring Families, and what happened in your life that now you're there?
When I was 20 years old, my wife was my girlfriend at the time. She was a third-year student at the University of Connecticut, and she found herself, along with me, in an unplanned pregnancy. And it was really just a scary moment. You know, at that age, you're in college, you think you have your whole life ahead of you, and this just seemed to really just pile down on there. And that was a really stressful time. And I remember, again, as I mentioned, I had kind of grown up in a house that I think a lot of people would call religious, or at least friendly to religion. But even in that situation, I remember what it was like to even to consider an abortion at that point, because it would have just allowed everything to kind of go back to normal there. So as we worked through that space, we made a commitment to one another to, of course, keep the child. He is now 25 years old, going to be 26-year-old in next month. And we have been married for just as long. And that was just a changing point in our lives. And so what ended up happening is later on, as we both came to faith together, and we started serving in the church, starting ministering towards people, to other married couples, other people who were doing things like that. And so that kind of paved the way for the role that I'm in right now with Caring Families.
What attracted you to becoming the executive director there? Something had to click inside. What was it?
I don't know if you know this or not, but 100% of all pregnancies, there's a man involved. And so for me, that was really what clicked there. It was the God speaking to me, letting me know how important it is when a woman is faced with an unplanned or unexpected pregnancy, and she may even be considering abortion, how important of a role that man, that father of the baby, plays in her life. And so that's why the Lord kind of called me in that place, because I think pregnancy is not just a woman's issue. It's a human issue. It's for everybody needs to be involved in there. And so I'm stepping into that space as a man, hoping to raise up just a culture of supporting women.
How do you convince a pregnant woman that this child is worth having?
That's a great question. You know, when you consider what goes into a decision of a person when they're making about what they're going to do with their pregnancy, a lot of it has to do around money, whether it's their job, raising it, baby formula, diapers, cribs, daycare, if they can stay in school. So it's all tied financially to them. So one of the things we try to do when we're in a conversation with them is let them know that we have just an amazing amount of resources and connections to solve some of those problems. But there's other things that are going on. And what we find works the best is, as people of faith, we take the time to sit down and listen to what our clients are saying. We're not telling them what we think. We're not telling them what we think they should do. We're letting them talk to us. And a lot of times, especially in something like an unplanned pregnancy, it's a crisis situation. And so people aren't thinking as clearly as they would outside of that really heightened situation. And so by just spending time with us, they get to hear, maybe for the very first time, what they're really thinking, what they're really feeling, because they don't know, because they're hearing it. They're hearing it from our culture. They might be hearing it from their mothers or from the father of the babies. So just by able to take that time, that's really the first step in letting them know that they're special, and that also it gives them an opportunity for them to discover through that time that that child is equally as special.
What do you do for this person who's going to be a parent who has no idea how to raise a baby, raise a child, raise a youngster?
But what we're doing for our clients as we're walking them through there, as they make decisions to parent, we bring resources for them. So part of that is material support. So we want to remove that anxiety of how am I going to get a crib? How am I going to get a car seat? How am I going to do these things? So we start removing some of those obstacles and those anxieties. And then we also invite them into a long-term relationship with us through parenting education programs.
I've got to ask you an obvious question. What gives you the most satisfaction about what you do?
Regardless of what the decisions of clients are with their pregnancies, the space that we're in, we know that the Lord is with us. So that gives us the most satisfaction. Again, when we're talking about this, pregnancy can be like a very abstract concept. And I think this is part of the reason why we've seen an increase in abortion over the years, because they look at it as being abstract. Well, again, one of the services we provide is an ultrasound to be able to look and see what's happening with that pregnancy. And that's a really important part, because I think it really reveals to us something that only God has seen for hundreds and thousands of years, right? We finally get to see something that nobody else has got to see. And so that little bit of information in the ultrasound helps in their mind realize that this isn't just a clump of cells. This isn't something else. It's something real. And that when they make decisions based on just seeing God's creation that's already there, that would probably be one of those moments where we enjoy very much, and it's very rewarding.
How often does seeing that ultrasound change the way they think? And what do they think after they've seen the ultrasound?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's very impactful. Again, it's more information. It's information that they don't have. And it's taking these abstract ideas and making them real and concrete. The reality is that we have clients who come in and they're considering having an abortion, and they know that we don't provide abortion, but they still want to talk and hear what we say. And when the time comes from the ultrasound, there's women that close their eyes and refuse to look at the screen. And that just to us speaks just even more so of how important it is to look at the ultrasound. So it's super important. And I've heard a lot of stories from women who have had abortions and have gone to abortion clinics, and they do not show them the ultrasound. And that, I think, it tells us and gives us that full story of how important just looking at an ultrasound can be in making something real.
A lot of crisis pregnancy centers are feeling pressure from the opposition. What about caring families? Are you feeling the pressure too, and what kind of pressure is it?
Yeah, there's been an uptick in pressure against the work that we're doing. And sadly, most of the things you're hearing they're just not true. And some of the things you're hearing may have happened one time somewhere, or out in Mississippi or Missouri. And so it doesn't really paint a real picture of the work that we're doing. We've faced challenges with the state legislator here in Connecticut, as well as they're trying to do things across the whole country, trying to just kind of prohibit some of the work we're doing. I think the hardest thing is for those that would call themselves pro-choice is they have a really hard time imagining how we could sit down with somebody and not push our biases on them, and that they would make a decision that's not abortion. I think that's a really challenging concept for them. They don't understand what that's like to be able to have people change their minds on their own without a fear of a bias. And so that's been the hardest part. They think there's manipulation and there's trickery going into it. But honestly, the reality is that if a person is pro-choice, then this parenting and making adoption plans are absolutely one of those choices that need to be available to every woman in this country. Those are the areas that we specialize in, and that's where we're doing the work.
If we have a listener listening to you right now and they're inspired and they're thinking, I'd like to get involved with Caring Families somehow, what would you tell them?
Depending on where you live, there's a lot of great organizations like ours throughout the entire state. So I would definitely, I think you're going to have more of an exciting impact by being closer to the one that's in your community and supporting them in the work. But if you would like to get involved or learn a little more about Caring Families, I say you can check us out on the web. It's carefamilies.com. So that's CARE. So carefamilies.com. And then you can just reach out with a contact form there. And we'd be glad to start a conversation with you. What we love to do is we'd love to talk about what we're doing. We love to give tours and just show and just share some of the wonderful things that God is doing in our ministry.
Thank you, Jeremy. We've been speaking with Jeremy Bradley, who is the Executive Director for Caring Families in Willimantic. Thanks for joining us on the WIHS Journal. I'm Steve Tuzinu.
And that's our WIHS Journal for today. Once again, our General Manager, Steve Tuzinu, interviewed Jeremy Bradley from Caring Families. For further information, call us at 860-346-1049, 860-346-1049, or email us, office@wihsradio.org, office@wihsradio.org. The WIHS Journal is public affairs from 104.9 WIHS.